to be imposed at the national level, but in consulting with my economic advisors, we believe that a financial transactions tax would work in the state of Illinois, where we have the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the Chicago Stock Options Board. In 2008, those two exchanges alone transacted over $1 quadrillion worth of trading for a minuscule tax on this kind of speculative trading of derivatives and options and futures and so on. Not pennies on the dollar, pennies on $100. We could raise billions of dollars. And we'd be basically charging the same finance, insurance, and real estate sectors that are largely responsible for the real estate bubble and where our economy is right now, what I would regard as, in part, the more predatory aspects of our economic system. They'd be required to pay a little bit more of their fair share to help our public sector function. It's basically fundamental fairness. We believe this will work. We believe that we can easily raise about $4.5 billion through a minuscule financial transactions tax. Step 4, create a state bank. This is another idea, another good progressive idea that the other candidates certainly aren't talking about. Of all 50 states today, about 48 or 49 of them are running to the same kind of problem we have with a structural budget deficit. We hear a lot about California. They're probably the worst. We're probably second or third worst. We're in the top 10, certainly. But there's one state that's not, and that's the state of North Dakota. And part of the reason, a big reason why North Dakota is not in the same kind of trouble that the other 49 states are, is because back in the 1920s, they adopted this progressive idea of having a state-owned and run bank. So when they go to borrow money, instead of borrowing money and promising to pay interest back to the same private institutional lenders that, again, are largely responsible for our current economic plight, they pay themselves back to their own state bank. They're investing in their own people. As a result of this history, the state of North Dakota, with a population of about 600,000 people, has a $1.2 billion budget surplus. Now, expand that to Illinois with its much larger population and start to think about the potential. And North Dakota hasn't even fully explored the potential of a state-run bank because they limit it to very circumscribed areas. They use it for student loans, which is good, and loans to farmers primarily, and they have to partner with other private banks. I propose that we not necessarily constrain ourselves in the same manner. I think a state bank has tremendous potential, not only to earn money for the state instead of paying money out, and thereby making it less necessary to continue to raise taxes, but as an engine of economic recovery and economic health in those areas where we want to grow, like sustainable transportation, sustainable energy production, and so on and so forth. Step 5, implement a greenhouse gas fee and dividend system, imposing fees on producers of greenhouse gas emissions and paying dividends to consumers based on income level. Now, this is taking an idea, we hear a lot about cap and trade, right? This is the Democrats' solution to global warming, and it's not a solution, it's a deception. The experience of Europe has shown that cap and trade doesn't really work. It mainly works as another vehicle for financial speculation more than it does to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm adopting the idea that the nation's, probably nation's #1 leading expert on global warming, Dr. James Hansen, has been promoting, and that is the idea of let's have a fee and dividend system where producers, the front-end producers of greenhouse gas emissions, we impose a fee on what they're emitting into our atmosphere. We're making them pay for the social cost that they are imposing on the rest of us. Then, because the impact of that could be regressive in the first instance, because gas bills might rise, home heating bills might rise, and so on, we make sure that lower and middle income class wage earners are protected by requiring them to pay dividends back to the people of a large portion of what they're paying into the public treasury. So what we're proposing is a system where basically we would be imposing fees, our calculations would be about $5.5 billion but $3.5 billion would be going back to the people directly in terms of a quarterly dividend check that you would be receiving to help offset the cost of the higher energy bills. And it would be based on your last tax return. People at the lowest end might actually receive a higher dividend than the amount they're paying in the higher energy bills. People in the middle would pay about the same. People higher up the income scale would be paying, would receive less. So again, we're trying to introduce some progressivity into our tax system to balance the regressivity. And we're raising $2 billion in net revenue in the process. Finally, the sixth other way in which I believe that we can solve the budget deficit crisis, it's a minor point. Unfortunately, when I spoke about this in my press conference in Springfield, some reporter decided it was the headline. You know, Whitney wants to legalize pot and tax it. This was the headline in a lot of newspapers. It's really a very minor part of my budget plan, but it is nonetheless significant. And that is the idea that, in my mind, it is absolutely absurd that a harmless substance like cannabis is illegal, and we waste a lot of criminal justice resources on apprehending, jailing, and sometimes imprisoning people for possessing this basically harmless euphoric substance. In addition, a little bit more broadly, I believe the whole idea of the war on drugs has been a misguided mistake for a long time, putting people in prison for years. Now, I'm not saying anything goes. I believe that some drugs should remain illegal, certainly more dangerous drugs like methamphetamines and so on. But for the most part, serious drug abuse should be treated as a serious medical issue, not a criminal justice issue. People that are a danger to themselves and society, of course, they need to be taken out of society for a while, but then, even then, they need to, the emphasis has to be on treatment and rehabilitation, not warehousing people for years and years because they did something stupid once in their lives, and in many cases didn't even hurt anyone else doing it. So this is something else that I think both on the spending side and on the revenue side, we can help us meet our budgetary goals. It's not a big part. It's impossible to estimate what kind of revenue we would raise by legalizing cannabis in the state of Illinois and then taxing it. There's no way of knowing that. I mean, it's just impossible to predict. The best guesstimate I can give is that if we raised about 1/3 of the amount we raised from tobacco taxes, that would be about $200 million a year. So that's probably about as good a guess as you're going to get. But it is. I think it would be a good step, and it would also, I believe, be good for our economy as well to raise an additional source of revenue. And I might add, I don't have this in my paper yet, but if we legalize cannabis, we should also be legalizing its close cousin, hemp, which could also allow us to do many other things as far as energy self-sufficiency, paper production, and a number of other things, and help us reach a sustainable future. Now, I've left myself little time to talk about job creation per se, but that's largely because we cannot hope to fix our economic problems until we fix our budget problems. Those who say that the way to create jobs is to, you know, we've been hearing this for years. The way to create jobs is to cut government spending, and then this will lead to lower taxes, and we get taxes low enough, this will attract businesses, and that's how we're going to attract jobs. We've been hearing this for 30 years. Most states in the United States have been practicing this for 30 years. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, and you're in a race to the bottom when you do that. You're giving away the store, trying to entice corporations to come to your state, while meanwhile you're bankrupting education, you're ruining your healthcare system, you're shortchanging your infrastructure, and you're basically ruining, you know, the basis for real good job creation. That is a deception, and we can no longer afford to go along with this. I believe that the way out of our current economic disaster is not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again, which is the definition of insanity. We need to reverse course. Instead of impoverishing the public sector and driving down wages in a vain hope of attracting businesses that will leave again as soon as they find an even more craven state or country to go to, we need to focus on building a public sector that in turn can help us build businesses that are productive and loyal to our communities, and hopefully controlled and empowered by our communities. Such a strategy would also attract productive businesses